It's Tuesday, March 19, 2025, 9:32 p.m., Miami, Florida. The temperature hovers at 78 degrees, but the humidity makes it feel closer to 90. A silver Honda Civic sits parked across from Ramirez Auto Service, a single-bay garage tucked into the corner of Southwest 27th Avenue in Flagami. The street is quiet tonight. Too quiet for Miami. Even the usual Friday traffic feels muted, as if the city itself is holding its breath. Inside the Civic, Agent Mariah Cortez, 27, adjusts her earpiece and leans forward, eyes locked on the dimly lit garage across the street. Through her scope, she watches Luis Ramirez move methodically around his shop, wiping down tools, organizing wrenches on magnetic strips. From the outside, he looks like any other mechanic closing up for the night. Blue overalls, grease-stained hands, a slight limp favoring his left knee from an old car jack accident. But Luis Ramirez isn't just a mechanic. For the past 6 weeks, his shop has served as a covert DEA surveillance hub, monitoring extortion activities by MS-13's East Coast faction. Hidden beneath his workbench sits a microphone array transmitting live audio to federal agents. Embedded in his shirt, near his ribs, is a wire the size of a postage stamp, recording every conversation, every threat, every demand for protection money. What the gang doesn't know, what they're about to discover in the worst possible way, is that Luis doesn't work alone. 4 blocks away, a tactical response unit sits ready. 2 streets over, undercover agents monitor license plates. And across the street, Mariah Cortez has a direct line to a federal prosecutor building a RICO case that could dismantle one of Miami's most violent extortion rings. Tonight, 3 MS-13 enforcers are coming to collect $500 in protection money. They think Luis is just another terrified business owner. They have no idea the man under the hood has been working for the DEA for nearly a decade. Luis Alberto Ramirez was born on May 7, 1982, in Camagüey, Cuba, a province known more for cattle ranches than opportunity. His father, Ernesto Ramirez, worked as a state-employed truck mechanic, repairing Soviet-era vehicles that should have been retired decades earlier. His mother, Carmen, sold vegetables at the local cooperative market, haggling over tomatoes and yucca to stretch pesos that barely covered rent. Luis grew up with grease under his fingernails. By age 12, he could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. By 15, he was helping his father rebuild transmissions for extra cash, learning that patience and precision mattered more than speed. His father used to say, "Un motor no miente," an engine doesn't lie. That philosophy shaped everything Luis would become. In March 2000, at 18, Luis left Cuba on a makeshift raft with 7 others, part of the desperate wave of emigrants risking their lives for a chance at America. The journey took 31 hours. 2 people didn't make it. Luis washed ashore near Key Largo with nothing but wet clothes and his father's wrench set, wrapped in plastic bags to keep it dry. Under the wet foot, dry foot policy still in effect at the time, he was granted asylum and bused to Miami. The first 2 years were survival mode. Luis slept on couches in Little Havana, worked restaurant kitchens, cleaned hotels, painted houses, anything that paid cash. English came slowly, learned through soap operas and conversations with delivery drivers. But engines were a universal language. By 2003, he'd saved enough to rent a small bay in Flagami and opened Ramirez Auto Service with a hand-painted sign and a prayer. Word spread fast in immigrant communities. Luis es de confianza. Luis can be trusted. He didn't overcharge, didn't cut corners, and never asked questions when cash customers showed up after hours. By 2010, his shop had become a neighborhood fixture, the kind of place where cops brought their personal vehicles because they knew the work would be honest. That's how Luis first connected with law enforcement, not as an informant, but as a mechanic. In 2014, a detective from Miami-Dade PD brought in an unmarked cruiser that needed a new alternator. Luis fixed it for cost, no questions asked. The detective recommended him to others. Soon, federal agents started showing up. DEA, ATF, even U.S. Marshals, needing work done on vehicles they couldn't take to regular shops. In 2016, Luis met Agent Mariah Cortez during a routine service call. She was 22 then, fresh out of training at Quantico, assigned to the DEA's Miami Field Division. She brought in a seized SUV that needed hidden compartments repaired for undercover operations. Luis delivered flawless work and never mentioned the bullet holes he found welded shut beneath the chassis. Mariah was different from other agents. Born in Hialeah to Cuban parents, she understood the codes of neighborhood loyalty, the unspoken rules of la calle. She spoke Spanish without the textbook formality most federal agents carried. Over time, she and Luis developed a quiet professional trust. When she needed technical work that couldn't be logged officially, she came to him. When Luis saw something suspicious, license plates that appeared too frequently, vehicles with hidden modifications, he'd mention it casually over coffee. By 2018, the DEA's Miami office realized they had something valuable: access. Luis moved through worlds most agents couldn't penetrate: immigrant networks, cash economies, the gray zone where legal businesses overlapped with criminal enterprises. That year, Special Agent in Charge Robert Theroux made Luis an unofficial offer: serve as a technical consultant for vehicle surveillance operations. Not a registered confidential informant, not someone working off charges, just someone whose garage could occasionally double as an observation post. Luis said yes. But not for money, not for immigration favors. He said yes because of Javier. Javier Ramirez, Luis's younger brother, came to Miami in 2019 on an expired tourist visa and never left. He worked food delivery, sending money back to their aging parents in Cuba. In October 2023, Javier was beaten outside a Hialeah apartment complex by MS-13 members demanding a delivery tax, $50 per week, to operate on their territory. They took $300 from him that night and left him with a concussion, 2 cracked ribs, and a terror that never fully healed. Miami PD classified it as robbery, suspect unknown. Luis knew better. When Agent Cortez approached Luis 6 months later with a proposal, allow his shop to be used as a surveillance front for an MS-13 extortion investigation, he didn't hesitate. This wasn't about the law. This was about Javier limping into his apartment, afraid to leave, afraid to stay. This was about every small business owner paying protection money to monsters who called themselves entrepreneurs. Now, at 42, Luis Ramirez carries the kind of exhaustion that comes from living 2 lives. His ex-wife, Sofia, left him in 2021, tired of late nights and evasive answers about where he'd been. Their son, Gabriel, now 16, lives with her in Hialeah. Luis sends money every week, $400 he can barely afford, but sees his son maybe twice a month. Gabriel thinks his father is just a struggling mechanic. He doesn't know about the wire. He doesn't know his father sits at the center of a federal investigation. Luis's psychological profile, filed by Agent Cortez during pre-operational assessment, describes him as methodical, emotionally restrained, compliant under pressure. But she added a single note in the margins that would prove prophetic. Subject internalizes trauma exceptionally well. If psychological break occurs, expect rapid decompensation rather than gradual decline. Luis doesn't consider himself brave. He considers himself angry. And tonight, that anger is about to collide with 3 men who have no idea they're walking into a federal trap. The day starts like any other. Luis opens the garage at 7:15 a.m., same routine he's followed for 15 years. Coffee first. 3 heaping spoonfuls of Café Bustelo, 2 of sugar, instant because he's never had time for brewing. Then the metal rolling door screeches open, that familiar grinding sound that announces another day of survival in Miami. The morning air is already thick with humidity. By 8 a.m., sweat darkens the collar of his blue Dickies coveralls. The radio hums softly, 103.5 FM playing old boleros, the kind his mother used to sing while cooking. Olga Guillot's voice fills the shop. Miénteme más, que me hace tu maldad feliz. Lie to me more, your cruelty makes me happy. Luis hums along without thinking about the lyrics. Business flows slowly at first. A middle school teacher brings in a '98 Toyota Corolla with transmission trouble, wants to know if it's worth fixing or if she should sell it for parts. Luis examines it carefully, gives her the honest answer. Another year, maybe 2, if she drives gently. She thanks him, pays $85 cash, leaves him a bag of homemade pastelitos. This is why people come to Luis. Not because he's cheap, but because he doesn't lie. Around 10:30 a.m., a delivery driver limps in, begging for a brake pad replacement at cost. He's got 3 kids, rent due Friday, barely making it. Luis charges him $40, half what the parts actually cost. The driver almost cries. Luis waves him off. Págame cuando puedas. Pay me when you can. Between customers, Luis takes discreet calls from Agent Cortez. They speak in code, conversations that sound mundane to anyone listening. Hey Luis, I need to know if that paint shipment came in yet. Yeah, earlier than expected. Might need to reorder by Friday. Translation: MS-13 members approached a new business owner. They'll likely return for collection within 3 days. By noon, surveillance technicians quietly rotate through the alley behind the shop. They arrive in unmarked vans disguised as tire distributors, carrying equipment that looks like industrial batteries. One tech kneels near the electrical panel, recalibrating a hidden camera embedded in the ventilation grate. Another replaces a fluorescent bulb above the workbench, now a fiber optic audio relay transmitting directly to DEA servers. Luis pretends not to notice. He learned early, don't watch the watchers. Act normal. Paranoia reads on faces, and faces are how criminals assess threats. Across town in a warehouse near Doral, the MS-13 enforcement crew assigned to collect from Ramirez Auto Service holds a meeting. 3 men, Carlos El Truco Amador, 31, Eddie Peque Martinez, 26, and Jorge Cardenas, 19. Together, they've extorted 13 businesses since January 2025, pulling in roughly $24,000 in protection payments. Most pay without resistance. A few try to negotiate. One simply disappeared, a barbershop owner who told Carlos he'd rather die than pay. His shop burned down 3 days later. No one saw anything. No one said anything. Carlos Amador runs the operation with cold efficiency. Born in San Salvador, raised in Los Angeles gang culture, deported in 2019 after serving 4 years for aggravated assault. He returned to Miami through cartel smuggling routes, re-established himself within MS-13's South Florida hierarchy, and built a reputation for discipline. Unlike younger gang members who flaunted violence, Carlos preferred psychology. The right threat, delivered calmly, worked better than a beating. But when someone refused too many times, the example had to be public. Luis Ramirez had become a problem. Twice he'd delayed payment, claiming slow business. Once he asked if they'd accept a payment plan, something Carlos found insulting. In their world, delayed payment meant disrespect. Disrespect meant weakness, and weakness invited challenges from rival cliques. But Eddie Martinez, the second in command, isn't convinced this mechanic is weak. Something about Luis bothers him. The way he stays calm, the way he doesn't flinch. Most business owners sweat, stammer, beg. Luis just listens and nods. During their last visit, Eddie muttered to Carlos, "Ese tipo no tiene miedo, cuidado." That guy isn't scared. Be careful. Carlos dismissed it. Fear comes in different forms, he said. Some people freeze, some run. Luis's type? They pay eventually. They just need the right motivation. Jorge Cardenas, the youngest, sees this whole operation as a test. He joined MS-13 at 15, did his first armed robbery at 17, got his gang tattoos last year. He's eager to prove himself, eager to move up the hierarchy. To him, Luis is just another old man who needs to learn respect. Tonight, Jorge plans to make that lesson clear. Back at the garage, Luis finishes installing an alternator on a Honda Civic around 3 p.m. when something shifts. A barely perceptible change in the air. The radio suddenly crackles with interference, white noise cutting through Celia Cruz mid-song. Luis glances up. Nothing visible. But in the surveillance van 4 blocks away, Agent Cortez notices it too. Signal disruption on the hidden microphone feed. Theroux were getting RF interference near the target site. Mariah reports over secure channel. Could be them testing police scanners. Theroux responds. Or checking for wires. Stay sharp. Luis doesn't hear this conversation, but he feels the tension like static electricity before a storm. He texts Mariah a single code, 27. Their agreed signal for unusual activity detected. She responds immediately, 10 to 4. Stay normal. Eyes on. The afternoon drags into evening. Customers thin out after 5 p.m. By 7 p.m., the garage is empty except for Luis and the ghosts of 1,000 repaired engines. He cleans methodically, wipes down tools, sweeps oil stains, organizes parts on metal shelves. Every motion deliberate, buying time, waiting. Around 8:45 p.m., his phone vibrates. A text from an unknown number. Tonight, 9:30. Bring cash or bring consequences. Luis doesn't respond. He forwards the screenshot to Mariah, then deletes it. In the surveillance van, federal agents review the message, cross-reference the phone number, a burner already flagged in 3 prior extortion cases, and confirm the operation is live. Agent Cortez calls Luis directly, voice calm but firm. Luis, they're coming tonight. You know the protocol. Let them talk. Let them threaten. We record everything. Do not escalate. Do not resist. We'll move the second they commit to the crime. And if they mention Gabriel again? Luis asks quietly. Silence. Then, we won't let it get that far. Trust me. Luis hangs up. He doesn't feel reassured. He feels trapped between 2 forces. The law demanding patience and his instinct screaming that patience gets people killed. At 9:15 p.m., rain begins to fall. Slow, fat drops that tap the metal roof like distant drums. Lightning flashes in the distance, illuminating the empty street. Luis stands near the open garage door, hands in his pockets, waiting. The wire pressed against his ribs feels heavier than it should. Outside, Mariah watches from the Civic. Her hands rest on the steering wheel, knuckles white. She's been in surveillance operations before, but never one this personal. Luis isn't just an asset to her. He's someone she respects, someone who didn't have to do this but chose it anyway. If something goes wrong tonight, she'll carry that weight. At 9:28 p.m., headlights appear at the end of the block. A dark SUV, windows tinted beyond legal limits, rolls slowly down 27th Avenue. It passes the garage once, circling the block like a predator assessing prey. Then it parks directly in front, engine idling. Luis's pulse quickens, but his face stays neutral. This is it. The convergence of 6 weeks of preparation, federal resources, and one mechanic's quiet rage. The SUV's doors open. 3 shadows emerge, moving with practiced coordination. Carlos leads, dressed in a black polo and jeans, gold chain catching streetlight. Eddie follows, scanning corners with the discipline of someone who's been arrested before. Jorge brings up the rear, hands in his pockets, grinning like this is entertainment. Inside the surveillance van, Agent Theroux gives the order. All units, subjects on site, maintain positions. Do not engage until payment demand is verbalized and recorded. Mariah whispers into her radio, voice barely audible. Luis, they're walking in. Remember, stay calm. We've got you. But Luis doesn't respond. He's watching Carlos Amador step into his garage, and all he can think about is Javier limping home with broken ribs, terrified to answer his door. Some operations are about justice. Others are about revenge disguised as duty. Carlos enters first, moving with the casual confidence of someone who's done this 30 times before. He glances around the garage, cataloging exits, cameras, visible ones at least, and potential weapons. His eyes linger on a tire iron near the workbench, then dismiss it. No threat. Working late, Poppy? Carlos says, voice friendly but edged with menace. Just finishing up. Luis replies evenly. Didn't expect company. Carlos smiles. The kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. You know why we're here. Luis sets down his wrench slowly, deliberately. Every motion controlled. He wipes his hands on a rag stained with 15 years of engine oil and turns to face them fully. I told Eddie last week. Business has been slow. I don't have $500. Jorge steps forward, laughing. Man, you think this is a negotiation? You think you got options? Eddie shoots Jorge a look. Shut up. Then addresses Luis directly. Listen, viejo. We don't want problems. But the boss? He's getting tired of waiting. You pay tonight or we start making visits, you understand what I'm saying? Luis understands perfectly. It's the same threat they've used on 12 other business owners. But this time, the threat includes a specific detail that makes Luis's blood run cold. Nice kid you got, by the way, Carlos adds casually. Saw him last week at the Hialeah McDonald's. Plays basketball, right? Number 12 jersey? Luis freezes. Gabriel's jersey number. They've been watching his son. Outside in the Civic, Mariah hears this through the live feed and immediately radios Thoreau. They just threatened the subject's minor son by name. We have probable cause for immediate intervention. Negative, Thoreau responds. We need payment demand on record for RICO predicate. Hold position. Mariah's jaw tightens. Hold position. Let them keep threatening a 16-year-old kid for the sake of evidence. Inside the garage, Luis's hands tremble. Not from fear, but from suppressed rage. He takes a slow breath, the kind his father taught him when working on engines. Control your emotions or you break the machine. You leave my son out of this, Luis says quietly. Then pay up, Carlos counters. 500. Cash. Now. Luis glances toward the counter where a lockbox sits. The bait money DEA provided for this exact scenario. But something stops him. Maybe it's the mention of Gabriel. Maybe it's 6 weeks of playing victim. Maybe it's remembering Javier's face, beaten and terrified. What if I don't? Luis asks. The question hangs in the air like smoke. Jorge actually laughs. What if you don't? Man, you crazy or stupid? Carlos raises a hand, silencing Jorge. He steps closer to Luis, close enough that Luis can smell cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. You really want to find out what happens when people don't pay? Ask the barber on 12th Street. Oh wait, you can't. His shop burned down. Luis holds Carlos's gaze. And in that moment something shifts. Luis's posture straightens. His hands stop shaking. His voice drops to a register Mariah has never heard before. You know what's funny? Luis says slowly. You walk in here thinking you're in control. Thinking you're collecting protection money from some scared mechanic. But you're wrong. Wrong about what? Carlos asks, still smiling. About what this place really is. Eddie's hand moves toward his waistband. Instinct, not aggression. Carlos tilts his head, curious now. Enlighten me, Papi. What is this place? Luis doesn't answer immediately. He glances toward the hidden camera above the workbench, then back at Carlos. It's a federal sting operation. And you just confessed to extortion on a live recording. The words land like grenades. For 2 seconds, nobody moves. Then chaos erupts. Jorge reaches for his gun. Eddie spins toward the door. Carlos's face transforms from confident to confused to furious in the span of a heartbeat. Outside, Mariah screams into her radio, Subjects drawing weapons, all units move now. But Luis doesn't wait for backup. The moment Jorge's hand touches his waistband, Luis moves, not away, but toward. Engagement number 1. Before we continue, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city and state in the comments. This story happened in Miami, but it could have been anywhere in America. A small business owner forced to choose between fear and resistance. I want to know where this reaches, and I want to hear from you as this unfolds. Luis's mind operates in 2 modes simultaneously, the terrified civilian and the strategist. For 6 weeks, he's played the victim, compliant, nervous, non-threatening. But now, with his son's safety mentioned, with a gun being drawn in his garage, with 3 armed men between him and survival, the civilian part shuts down completely. What replaces it isn't training. Luis has no tactical experience, no combat background. What replaces it is something rawer, the primal calculation of a cornered animal who realizes the only way out is through. Time doesn't slow down like in movies. It compresses. Jorge's hand is moving toward his waistband where Luis glimpsed a Glock 19 earlier. The motion takes maybe 0.8 seconds in real time. But in that fraction of a second, Luis processes 15 years of working with tools, understanding leverage, understanding that mechanics and violence operate on the same principle. Force applied at the right point creates exponential results. His options flash like a schematic. Option 1, freeze, wait for backup. Probability. Jorge draws first, uses Luis as hostage leverage against federal agents. Outcome, standoff, potential casualties. Gabriel becomes leverage. Option 2, comply, hand over bait money, let them leave before agents intercept. Probability. They escape. Investigation continues. Threats against Gabriel escalate. Option 3. Act first. Probability, unknown. Risk, catastrophic. Advantage, surprise. Luis chooses option 3. Not because he's brave, because he's terrified in a way that overrides self-preservation. The same fear that kept him quiet for 6 weeks now detonates into action. His body moves before conscious thought catches up. The nearest improvised weapon is 18 inches from his right hand, a 24-inch breaker bar. Solid steel, 2 pounds, designed to break rusted bolts loose. Mechanics call it a persuader. Luis's fingers close around it. Jorge's gun clears his waistband. Luis swings the breaker bar in a short, compact arc, not wild, controlled. The steel connects with Jorge's wrist just above the gun's grip. The sound is distinct, bone meeting metal. Jorge's scream is immediate. The Glock tumbles, skittering across oil-stained concrete. 1.2 seconds elapsed. Eddie reacts next, not drawing his weapon, but lunging toward Luis, trying to tackle him before this escalates further. But Eddie doesn't account for Luis's footing. 15 years of working on uneven garage floors teaches balance. Luis pivots left, uses Eddie's momentum against him, and drives the breaker bar horizontally into Eddie's solar plexus. The man collapses, gasping. 2.9 seconds elapsed. Carlos, the strategist, doesn't go for his gun. He goes for leverage. He grabs a heavy crescent wrench from the workbench and swings it toward Luis's head. Luis barely blocks with the breaker bar. The impact sends vibrations up his arm, numbing his hand. Carlos is stronger, younger, and angrier. "You're dead," Carlos hisses. "You and your son. Both dead." Outside, the world erupts in motion. Mariah throws open the Civic's door, weapon drawn, sprinting across the street. 30 meters behind her, the tactical response van's doors burst open. 4 agents in full gear moving toward the garage. But in a firefight, 30 meters might as well be 30 miles. Inside, Luis and Carlos grapple. The wrench clatters away. They crash into a rolling toolbox, spilling sockets and screwdrivers across the floor. Carlos gets Luis in a chokehold. Actual trained technique, not street fighting. Luis's vision starts to gray at the edges. His lungs scream for air. Then muscle memory from 1,000 engine repairs kicks in. When something's stuck, find the weak point and apply sudden force. Luis drives his elbow backward into Carlos's floating ribs. Once, twice. The grip loosens. Luis gasps air, spins, and throws a wild punch that connects with Carlos's jaw more by luck than skill. Both men stumble apart, heaving. Jorge is on the ground, cradling his broken wrist, sobbing. Eddie is slowly getting to his knees, still wheezing. And Carlos is reaching not for a weapon but for his phone, trying to call for backup. Luis doesn't think. He grabs the nearest heavy object, a transmission gear housing, maybe 30 pounds, and hurls it. The metal chunk catches Carlos in the shoulder, spinning him around. His phone clatters away. That's when the federal agents flood through the door. "Federal agents, hands, hands, hands!" The shouting is simultaneous, overlapping, deafening. 4 agents in black tactical gear, rifles raised, filling the small garage with overwhelming presence. Red laser dots dance across chests, walls, tools. Jorge raises his unbroken hand immediately, crying. Eddie stays on his knees, hands visible. Carlos freezes, calculating whether resistance is survival or suicide. Luis collapses against the workbench, chest heaving, still holding the breaker bar. Mariah is the first to reach him, not as an agent but as someone who's watched him endure 6 weeks of psychological torture. "Luis, put it down, it's over." He looks at her, really looks, and the adrenaline finally cracks. His hands shake so violently the breaker bar clatters to the floor. She catches him before he collapses completely. "I'm okay," he gasps. "Are they?" "Everyone's alive," she confirms. "You're okay. Gabriel's okay. It's over." But it's not over, not remotely. While agents secure the 3 gang members, flex cuffs, Miranda warnings, weapons cataloged, something goes wrong outside. A 4th MS-13 member who'd been waiting in the SUV as a lookout sees federal agents swarming the garage. He doesn't call for help. He doesn't flee. He does something worse. He opens fire. 3 shots from a semi-automatic pistol crack through the humid night air. One round shatters the Civic's windshield. Another hits the garage's metal siding, ricocheting with a sound like a hammer striking an anvil. The third finds flesh, grazes Agent Theroux's shoulder as he's coordinating the scene from the street. Theroux goes down, not critically, but down. And suddenly the controlled arrest becomes a full-scale incident. Shots fired. Officer down. Suspect vehicle. Black Tahoe. Fleeing southbound on 27th. 2 agents peel off to pursue. Another provides medical attention to Theroux. Inside the garage, Mariah pulls Luis behind the engine block of a lifted Ford F-250, using it as cover while chaos erupts outside. Stay down, she orders. Don't move. Luis doesn't argue. His entire body is shaking now. Post-adrenaline crash hitting him like a physical force. Through the gap beneath the Ford's chassis, he watches Carlos being dragged toward an armored vehicle, still fighting, still screaming threats. You're marked, mechanic. Your whole family. You think this ends here? One of the agents forces Carlos's head down, shoving him into the vehicle. But the damage is done. Those words, recorded, witnessed, undeniable, just escalated this from extortion to witness intimidation, conspiracy, and potentially terroristic threats. Outside, police sirens wail closer. Miami PD, fire rescue, and more federal units converge on the scene. The neighborhood, normally quiet at this hour, lights up with concerned faces in windows, people filming on phones, confusion spreading like wildfire. Mariah radios for confirmation on the fleeing suspect. Response comes back 30 seconds later. Suspect vehicle crashed on Southwest 20th, driver in custody, 1 firearm recovered. She exhales, then realizes Luis is still shaking beside her, staring at his hands like they belong to someone else. Hey, she says gently. Luis, look at me. He does. His eyes are red, unfocused. Did I just... You defended yourself, she says firmly. Everything you did was legal. You understand? Self-defense, you're not in trouble. But Luis isn't worried about legal trouble. He's worried about the other kind, the kind that comes with a contract, a name, and a target painted on everyone he loves. 40 minutes later, the garage is a crime scene. Yellow tape cordons off the block. Evidence technicians photograph shell casings, document bloodstains, Jorge's from his broken wrist, and collect the scattered weapons. The media hasn't arrived yet, but they will. Police scanners picked up federal operation and shots fired, which in Miami means news vans within the hour. Luis sits on the bumper of an ambulance, a thermal blanket around his shoulders despite the heat. A paramedic checks his vitals. Blood pressure elevated but stable. No visible injuries beyond bruised ribs from Carlos's chokehold. The paramedic recommends hospital observation for shock. Luis refuses. I need to call my son. Mariah, standing nearby, nods. We've already sent a unit to your ex-wife's house. Gabriel's safe. But Luis, you can't go home. Not tonight. Maybe not for a while. The words hit him like cold water. Can't go home. Because Carlos's threat wasn't empty theater. MS-13 retaliation isn't a possibility. It's protocol. When a member gets arrested because of someone's cooperation, the organization responds. Not to punish the individual, but to send a message to everyone watching. Snitches become examples. How long? Luis asks. Until we assess the threat level. Could be days. Could be longer. Agent Theroux approaches, his shoulder bandaged, left arm in a sling. Despite being shot 40 minutes ago, he's still working. That's federal agent culture. Show weakness later, in therapy. Right now, operational priority. Luis, I need you to understand what just happened, Theroux says, crouching to eye level. You just helped us arrest 3 MS-13 enforcers on federal charges. Extortion, witness intimidation, conspiracy, and now attempted murder of a federal officer. That's life sentence territory. The U.S. Attorney's Office will prosecute this as a RICO predicate. You're the primary witness. Luis processes this slowly. What does that mean for me? It means you're valuable. And what's valuable gets protected. Theroux glances at Mariah, who nods. We're placing you in temporary protective custody. You, your son, and your ex-wife. Safe house, rotating security, full protection until trial. Luis's face goes pale. For how long? Months. Maybe a year. Depends on how fast the case moves through court. The reality crashes down. A year in hiding. Gabriel pulled from school, from basketball, from his life. Sophia forced into witness protection because she shares his last name. All because Luis agreed to help the DEA catch extortionists. I can't ask them to do that, Luis whispers. You're not asking, Mariah says gently. Carlos threatened Gabriel by name. That threat was recorded. The moment he said that, your family became part of this, whether you like it or not. Luis looks at his garage, his livelihood, his identity, 15 years of work. Crime scene tape now blocks the entrance. Blood stains the concrete floor. The tools he organized this morning are scattered like shrapnel. Everything he built destroyed in 15 minutes of violence. What about my shop? We'll secure it, Theroux promises. But Luis, you can't come back here. Not until this is resolved. The investigation shifts into high gear. By midnight, the DEA's Miami field office has assembled a task force, 12 agents, 2 prosecutors, and a dedicated intelligence analyst pulling every digital thread connected to tonight's arrests. Carlos Amador isn't talking. Processed at the Federal Detention Center, he invokes his right to counsel and goes silent. But his phone, seized at the scene, becomes a roadmap. Encrypted messaging apps reveal communication with 17 other MS-13 members across South Florida. Geographic metadata shows regular meetings at specific locations. A warehouse in Doral, an auto body shop in Homestead, a house in Kendall. Jorge Cardenas, the youngest, breaks within 2 hours. Facing decades in federal prison, with a shattered wrist requiring surgery, he provides a detailed statement. He identifies the organizational structure. Who collects, who enforces, who distributes the money up the chain. He names 9 other businesses currently paying protection money. Businesses the DEA didn't know about. Eddie Martinez, the pragmatic one, negotiates. Through his attorney, he offers cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. By 2 a.m., he's providing detailed testimony about MS-13 South Florida operations. How much money flows monthly, estimated $45,000, $60,000, which corrupt officials look the other way, 2 Miami PD officers under investigation, and where the operations headquarters is located. That last piece of information triggers immediate action. At 3:17 a.m., federal agents execute simultaneous raids at 4 locations across Miami-Dade County. They recover $87,000 in cash, 14 firearms, including 2 stolen from law enforcement, ledgers documenting extortion payments dating back 2 years, drugs, secondary operation, 3 kilograms of cocaine, 500 fentanyl pills, electronic evidence, laptops, phones, encrypted hard drives. The raids result in 11 additional arrests. By dawn, the DEA has effectively dismantled one of South Florida's most organized extortion rings. But victories come with costs. While agents celebrate in conference rooms, Luis sits in a windowless safe house in Coral Gables, unable to sleep. Gabriel and Sophia arrived hours ago, escorted by federal marshals. Gabriel is confused, angry, demanding explanations. Sophia is terrified, blaming Luis for dragging their son into danger. You should have said no, she hisses while Gabriel tries to sleep in the next room. You should have just paid them. They threatened our son, Luis replies quietly. They knew where he goes to school. They knew his jersey number. Paying wouldn't have stopped them. And now what? We live in hiding? Gabriel loses his senior year. For what? So you could be a hero? Luis has no answer. Because she's right and wrong simultaneously. He didn't do this to be a hero. He did it because Javier's broken face haunted him. Because 13 other business owners were suffering. Because someone had to say no. But the consequences feel impossibly heavy now. In the other room, Gabriel lies awake, scrolling through Instagram messages from friends asking where he is, why he wasn't at practice, what happened. He can't answer. Federal agents took his phone, gave him a burner with no social media, no contacts. At 16, digital silence feels like erasure. Outside the safe house, 2 armed U.S. Marshals rotate shifts every 6 hours. Curtains stay drawn. Doors stay locked, a life suspended in protective custody. Engagement, there are 2. Stop here for a second. Luis just made a choice that destroyed his normal life. Some people will say he did the right thing. stood up to criminals, helped federal agents, protected his community. Others will say he was reckless, endangered his family for principle. There's no easy answer. What would you do? Not what you think you'd do. What would you actually do if 3 gang members threatened your child? Think about it. Comment below. Let's have a real conversation about this. Wednesday, March 20th, 2025, 11 a.m. The story breaks nationally. Miami Herald runs the headline. Federal sting operation dismantles MS-13 extortion ring. Local mechanic helps catch gang members. Within hours, CNN picks it up. Fox News calls it another example of Biden administration immigration failures. MSNBC frames it as brave small business owner stands up to violence. The truth, messy, complicated, human, gets lost in partisan interpretation. Luis watches the coverage from the safe house, seeing his garage on national television. Reporters interview neighbors who say he was quiet, kept to himself, always friendly. One woman tells CNN, "He fixed my car for free when I couldn't afford it." That's the kind of man he is. But online, the reaction splits viciously. Some call him a hero. Others call him a snitch who endangered his own family. MS-13 sympathizers post threats on social media, quickly deleted by platform moderators but screenshot and redistributed faster than they can be erased. One post, translated from Spanish, reads, "Rats die slowly in Miami. Tell your son we remember his face." Federal agents trace the IP address to a server in El Salvador. Unactionable. Terrifying nonetheless. By afternoon, the U.S. Attorney's Office holds a press conference. Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Sandoval stands at a podium, flanked by DEA leadership and Miami PD representatives. Yesterday, federal agents arrested 14 members of MS-13's South Florida faction on charges including racketeering, extortion, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit violence. This operation was made possible by the extraordinary courage of a civilian witness who chose to cooperate rather than comply with criminal demands. We will not identify this individual for safety reasons, but we want to assure the community, standing up to gangs is not only brave and it's effective. These arrests represent the dismantling of an organization that terrorized local businesses for over 2 years. The reporters ask questions. Are there concerns about retaliation? We take all threats seriously and have measures in place to protect witnesses. How much money was being extorted monthly? Evidence suggests between $50,000 and $70,000 across multiple businesses. Will the witness testify at trial? That determination will be made closer to trial date, but yes, witness testimony will be crucial. What they don't say, Luis has no choice. His recorded wire conversations are evidence, but prosecutors need him on the stand to authenticate the recordings, to explain context, to humanize the case for jurors. He's not just a witness. He's the case's emotional core. Over the following weeks, the investigation reveals layers prosecutors didn't anticipate. MS-13's extortion operation wasn't isolated. It was franchise-style. Different cliques operated in different neighborhoods, all reporting up to regional coordinators who reported to leadership in El Salvador. The money collected in Miami was wired through cryptocurrency exchanges to Central America, then distributed back to gang operations across multiple U.S. cities. Federal investigators traced the financial network to 23 cities nationwide. What started as a Miami extortion case becomes a multi-jurisdictional RICO prosecution involving DEA, FBI, ATF, IRS criminal investigation, and international partners in El Salvador and Honduras. The scope is staggering. Prosecutors estimate the organization generated $12 million annually from extortion alone, not counting drug trafficking and human smuggling. Luis's cooperation opened a door that revealed an empire, but with expanded scope comes expanded danger. The original 3 suspects, Carlos, Eddie, Jorge, are now cooperating witnesses themselves, turning on higher-ranking members in exchange for reduced sentences. Carlos, facing life without parole, provides testimony about MS-13's command structure that leads to 17 additional federal indictments. The gang's response is predictable. Eliminate the threat at its source, Luis. In late April, federal agents intercept encrypted communications between MS-13 leadership in El Salvador and Miami-based operatives. The messages are brief, coded, but clear. The rat must be found. Use family pressure. Offer $10,000 for location. U.S. Marshals increase security protocols. Luis's safe house changes locations every 2 weeks. His phone is monitored. His contact with the outside world is limited to supervised calls with Gabriel and Sophia. Even those conversations feel hollow, performative, strangled by fear. Gabriel struggles. Pulled from school, he's assigned a home tutor who doesn't understand why a teenager who made straight B's suddenly can't focus. He withdraws, spends hours gaming online, through secured servers, avoids talking about his life. During one supervised call, he tells Luis, "I hate you for this." Luis doesn't argue. What can he say? "I'm sorry I chose principal over your senior year?" It sounds hollow even in his head. Sophia files for divorce. The papers arrive at the safe house via federal courier. The grounds, irreconcilable differences. But the real reason is written in the margins of her life. She can't forgive Luis for voluntarily walking them into this nightmare. Luis signs the papers. No contest. What's the point of fighting? Their marriage died the night Carlos walked into his garage. Dr. Maria Castellanos, a criminologist at Florida International University specializing in gang behavior, provides expert analysis for the prosecution's RICO case. Her testimony, delivered in pretrial hearings, explains MS-13's evolution. MS-13 began in Los Angeles in the 1980s, formed by Salvadoran immigrants fleeing civil war. What started as a street gang protecting immigrant communities transformed into a transnational criminal organization. By the 2000s, they'd expanded into extortion, drug trafficking, and contract violence. What makes them particularly dangerous is their organizational discipline. Unlike traditional street gangs that operate chaotically, MS-13 functions like a corporation, hierarchical, strategic, brutally efficient. She explains the psychology of extortion. Extortion works because it exploits immigrant vulnerabilities. Business owners targeted by MS-13 are often undocumented or have undocumented employees. They don't trust police. They don't understand their legal rights. The gang leverages that fear, turning entire communities into revenue streams. What Luis Ramirez did, cooperating with federal agents, violates the fundamental rule of these neighborhoods. Stay silent, stay safe. When asked about retaliation risk, Dr. Castellanos is blunt. Witnesses who testify against MS-13 face lifetime risk. The organization has a long memory and significant resources. Even with witness protection, relocation, new identities, the danger never fully disappears. That's why so few people cooperate. The cost is too high. Her testimony is supposed to support the prosecution. Instead, it terrifies everyone involved. If experts say the danger is permanent, what exactly are they promising Luis? Meanwhile, defense attorneys for the accused gang members attack Luis's credibility. They argue he was a paid DEA informant motivated by money, not justice. They question why a simple mechanic would risk everything unless compensated. They subpoena DEA financial records, searching for evidence of payments. The truth is complicated. Luis received no direct payment for his cooperation, but the DEA did cover his safe house expenses, provided a modest stipend for lost business income, $2,000 monthly, and promised relocation assistance after trial. Defense attorneys frame this as profiting from betrayal. Public opinion fractures further. Conservative media portrays Luis as an American patriot. Progressive outlets question whether federal agents exploited a vulnerable immigrant. Spanish-language radio shows debate whether cooperation with law enforcement constitutes betrayal of La Raza. Luis doesn't listen to any of it. He's too busy trying to survive hour by hour, day by day, in protective custody. October 15, 2025. 7 months after the arrests, the trial begins. U.S. District Court, Southern District of Florida. The prosecution calls 43 witnesses over 6 weeks. Bank records, wiretap recordings, cooperating gang members, and dozens of business owners who finally feel safe enough to testify. Luis is witness number 37. He takes the stand on a Thursday morning wearing a suit the U.S. Marshals provided. He's lost 23 pounds since March. His hair has grayed at the temples. The man who sat in the safe house for 7 months barely resembles the mechanic who fought 3 gang members with a breaker bar. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sandoval leads the questioning. Mr. Ramirez, can you describe what happened on the night of March 19, 2025? Luis recounts everything. The wire he wore, the threats, Carlos mentioning Gabriel by name, the moment Jorge reached for his gun, his decision to fight back. The defense cross-examines aggressively. They attack his motives, his credibility, his finances. They suggest he fabricated threats to justify violence. They imply he's an unreliable narrator seeking money and attention. Luis remains calm throughout. When asked if he regrets his cooperation, he answers honestly, "Every single day. But I'd do it again. Because if I didn't, they'd still be threatening business owners. They'd still be threatening families. Someone had to say no." The jury deliberates for 4 days. On November 3, 2025, they return verdicts. Guilty on all counts for Carlos Amador and 6 other co-defendants. Sentencing ranges from 15 years to life without parole. The prosecution calls it a landmark victory. Luis calls it the beginning of a new nightmare. December 10, 2025. Luis Ramirez sits in a small apartment in Boise, Idaho. His new identity, his new life. The U.S. Marshals relocated him under the Witness Security Program after the trial concluded. New name, new social security number, new everything. Gabriel and Sophia declined relocation. She remarried. Gabriel started college in Florida, using a different address for safety. Luis works as a maintenance technician at a hotel. Nobody knows his past. He doesn't talk about Miami. He doesn't repair cars anymore. Too identifiable. Too risky. At night, he sits in his apartment and wonders if he'll spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. The safe house psychologist he met with before relocation explained that PTSD doesn't discriminate. Justified violence still produces trauma. Necessary choices still carry weight. Luis has nightmares most nights. Jorge's wrist breaking, Carlos's threats, Gabriel's voice saying, "I hate you." From a legal standpoint, Luis did everything right. He cooperated with federal agents. He testified truthfully. He helped dismantle a violent criminal organization. 14 gang members are now in federal prison. Hundreds of business owners are safer because of his courage. But legal victories don't heal psychological wounds. Luis saved his community and lost his family. He upheld the law and destroyed his life. The math doesn't balance. Dr. Castellanos was right. Witnesses who testify against MS-13 face lifetime risk. Even in Boise, even with a new identity, Luis knows the threat persists. Gang members have long memories. Federal witness protection is effective but not infallible. People get found. Secrets get exposed. So Luis lives carefully. He doesn't use social media. He doesn't tell neighbors where he's from. He works, eats, sleeps, and repeats. A life reduced to survival basics. Sometimes he calls Gabriel, who's slowly forgiving him. Sometimes he thinks about Sophia, who isn't. 3 months ago, a customer at the hotel asked Luis if he used to be a mechanic. "You've got the hands for it," the guy said. Luis lied and said no. That night, he lay awake until dawn, terrified that someone recognized him, that his cover was blown, that the danger he'd tried to escape had finally caught up. It was just a coincidence. But paranoia doesn't care about probability. PTSD doesn't care if violence was justified. Ray Mitchell, the Delta Force operator from our opening example, understood this. So do cops who survive shootings, soldiers who return from war, and mechanics who fight gang members in their garage. The legal system says you're a hero. Your nervous system says you're still in danger. Both can be true simultaneously. Luis told me during our last interview, conducted through secure channels, people think standing up to criminals is simple. You're either brave or you're scared. But it's not like that. I was terrified the whole time. I'm still terrified. The difference is I acted anyway. That's not bravery. That's just refusing to let fear make your decisions. The district attorney's office declined to press any charges against Luis for the physical altercation. The U.S. attorney called him an American hero. Media outlets profiled his courage. But Luis Ramirez doesn't want to be a hero. He wants to repair engines in peace, watch his son graduate college, maybe fall in love again someday. Instead, He's a ghost living in Idaho, afraid to use his real name, wondering if the nightmare ever truly ends. 10 months after the arrests, Ramirez Auto Service remains closed. The building stands empty, a for lease sign in the window. Occasionally, former customers drive by, wondering what happened to the quiet mechanic who always gave honest estimates. They don't know his real story. They probably never will. Justice was served. But at what cost? 14 criminals in prison. One family shattered. One man living in permanent exile from the only life he knew. MS-13 continues operating in Miami, though their extortion activities have decreased significantly since Luis's testimony. Other business owners now report threats more frequently, emboldened by the successful prosecution. But they also see what happened to Luis, see the price of cooperation, and many still choose silence. The case files will gather dust in federal archives. The trial transcripts will become legal precedent. And somewhere in Idaho, a maintenance worker with a fake name will spend another night trying to forget the moment he chose principle over peace. That's the real story. Not good versus evil. Not hero versus villain. Just a man who refused to comply, a system that promised protection it couldn't fully deliver, and consequences that ripple forever. Luis Ramirez, or whoever he is now, survived. But survival isn't the same as living. And sometimes the cost of doing the right thing is everything you held dear.